Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of The Delicious Legacy. With me, Thomas Janus. And what better way to kickstart Season 3 other than a festive celebratory episode all about Christmas and Christmas traditions and festivities and food of the 12 days of Christmas. So this is an updated episode from last year's Christmas episode. We're going to see some traditions from medieval Europe, Christmas foods from medieval Europe, and we'll see also traditional Christmas in Greece and what foods the Greeks eat during the 12 days of Christmas, plus some of my own childhood memories from Greece growing up in the small town of area. What did we do for Christmas? Anyway, I hope you'll enjoy. I'm going to talk a little bit about Christmas in Greece and traditions during the Christmas period in Greece. Obviously, when we talk about Christmas and Christmas celebrations, we need to have in mind that this is not just for a day. They don't last just the day of Christmas, 25th of December, but we're talking about a whole period of festivities. Just like as the ancients had the Saturnalia and the Chronia, and they celebrated for a whole month, more or less similar situation occurs throughout Europe during the winter time. You have lots of different saints to celebrate. You have Christmas, you have obviously the 12 days of Christmas, and you have New Year's and the Epiphany. Sometimes these celebrations go on until early February, really. Whereupon, obviously, at least in Greece, we have the Carnival, which is a period that everybody dresses up, and then you have the Lent for Easter. So yeah, I mean, it lasts really, really long. And throughout this long-lasting, before this long-lasting celebration time, there's always a Lent in Greek, at least in Greek Orthodox calendar anyway. So like we did talk about the Easter Lent, that it's the most important one. But even before Christmas, which is a big happy celebration for Christianity, there is a Lent too, there is fasting too. And traditionally, this one lasts for 40 days. My grandmother, which she was the daughter of a priest as well, she used to fast this whole period for 40 days. I, on the other hand, never lasted that long. And okay, for those of you who don't know, who are new listeners to the podcast, or they haven't listened to the one about Easter, the Lenten period is generally a period of abstinence from meat, fish, dairy, which includes milk, butter, cheese, and eggs. So whenever I've tried to fast, usually I only managed a week or two. I mean, who can live without cheese for that long? And insert here, oh, we're so spoiled nowadays. Back in my youth, we never ate this and that, and we lived in stale bread and water, blah, 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 blah. Okay, yeah, sorry, we are spoiled nowadays. And I like cheese. What can I do? I'm not going to apologize for that. Yeah, I digress. Anyway, I always try and do something like Lent anyway, even for that little while, a week. Not because I'm pious or religious or for diet or health reasons, to be honest, but because I'm just really, really greedy when Christmas comes. I need to be eating non-stop from 24th of December until the 6th of January at least. And for that reason, I need to keep my appetite. So yeah, that's why I might do some Lent before Christmas, guys. Again, I apologize profusely, but that's that. The Greek festive table is a cornucopia of tantalizing dishes. It's a feast. But as I said, it's not merely like this on the 25th of January. This is the norm for the 12 days over the Christmas period. The sight of a porker carcass hung upside down, head and all, never filled me with any dread or disgust. It always meant delicious charcoal roast was on its way the next day. A Christmas feast, an amazing meal for all. Our mothers and sisters would be a bit upset with the face of the animal. It was the main point of content. It felt yucky and gross. It looked too real, too gruesome. But we would never have the animal without its head. The elders used to say, a decapitated animal is very bad luck. Off it went, the whole animal, to the spit, through nose to tail eating. Before all this was a concept of fine dining in London restaurants, of course. We all have certain persistent memories from our festive family gatherings. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good. As we get older, perhaps, we tend to over romanticize this and the years of our childhood, and we get the warm and fuzzy feeling when we recall them, don't we? Well, even if it was filled with screams and shouts and big family rows, we can't help but feel nostalgic this time of the year around. We even miss that awkward conversation that we're going to have with a conspiracy theory loving uncle, which basically normally we would dread, but yeah, I think I would look forward to it if I had the chance to go to see the extended family, of course, back in Greece. So yeah, what can we do? What can I do? I have these memories of my Christmas, and I have them. I remember them through rose-tinted glasses, unfortunately or fortunately. So yeah, I'm gonna bore you with my childhood Christmas on this episode, people. In my mind, the most indelible picture of Christmas holidays from childhood was the day before 25th, Christmas Eve. During the daytime, of course, in my hometown of Veria, in northern Greece. We were outside in my grandmother's yard with my dad, my uncles, and the army of male cousins preparing the slaughtered animals for the following day's feast. Now, the words Greece and outdoors might mislead you, dear listener, thinking that this was a pleasant activity and fun pastime in the Greek sunshine. I can assure you, at the end of December, in mainland Greece, in the north, the winters are bitter, cold, and sometimes miserable. Well, at least this was the case before the runaway catastrophic climate change we are facing, and which seems to make each winter more unpredictable than the previous. This was men's time, primal and important. It felt like the time we were bonding as a family. My granddad giving instructions, my dad and his brothers, my uncles, and me and all the male cousins listening to him, all doing the important work, and us, the younger generation, the next masters, learning the secrets of barbecue and the techniques for the juiciest, most succulent hog in town, while having fun, of course, over the preparation of the animals. Most importantly, this gave us the place to bond. Cousins, friends of a similar age, those days would shape our mindset, our lust for conviviality, our desire to spend all of our free hours cooking and sharing the bounty of the fire pit with those who we love the most. We also connected with our roots, with our ancestors, with our grandfathers in the mountains and the rebels who lived wild lives in these unconquered mountaintops of Greece the previous centuries. Well, it's what we thought and pretended it was true at that time anyway. Now, on the preparation pit, we would have one or two hogs, depending how many family members were planning to be around, hung by their back feet from the roof of a shed on makeshift hooks. Perhaps, in addition, we would have a goat kid or a lamb too, for the sake of keeping everyone's tastes satisfied and for a bit of variety on the menu. First step would be to remove the precious innards, carefully keeping them for the infamous offal kebabs kokoretsi. Then we would proceed by singeing the skin with a very DIY contraption made with cotton wrapped around a hand-held mini skewer, not so mini, a long metal skewer basically, doused in alcohol and then set alight to remove any hairs. And lastly, on this first part was the washing of the carcass with a hose. These were carefully choreographed rituals with specific steps taken the same way year after every year. The spits, or souvlas, were then prepared, soaped, scrubbed, cleaned with vinegar and hot water. The animal was then put on the spit. From the back, through the inside of the belly, and out through the neck, and carefully again through the head, one could hear the gentle crack of the skull, the minimal hole on the forehead. Gruesome, I agree. Shocking perhaps, but nevertheless another skill we had to acquire. Precision and specific amount of power were needed. Too much and the whole head would break in two. Too little and obviously you wouldn't be able to get the pointy end of the skewer through. Then carefully tied on the spit with wire and prongs, protruding the meat and keeping the back legs together. Next was the seasoning. On our porky friend, we did a generous mixture of salt, pepper, oregano, garlic, and lemon slices. And then we sew the belly with a massive needle and thick butcher string. We would let the spit roast in this dry inside-out marinade for about 12 hours to really soak up the flavors. They were kept in a secure place, like in a larder, in a room ambient temperature, horizontally, as when they would have been when on a barbecue. It was winter, after all, and outside, and especially in the night, the temperature could drop really low. It was like a nature's fridge. I don't recall ever anything going wrong basically, or questioning whether we needed to buy a walk-in fridge to store the meat to keep it safe. One could easily imagine that we were feeling damaged and exhausted after a whole day out in the cold weather, carrying heavy barbecues from the basement, buried treasures from last year, unearthing them and revealing the stories of past revelry, washing with cold water the animals and freeze our asses off. But, for the most part, it was pleasure, joy and ecstasy. The feeling of belonging, I guess. Part game, part serious. And the transformation of the raw materials and the space itself to something worth celebrating about. All were playing an important role here. Here we were, in a small corner of the old town of area, and we defeated the elements and adverse conditions and had fun. Those festive days, including the Christmas Day fun we had, now I feel that are all stored in one place in time, separate from the rest of the chaotic memories. Recollections from our childhood that seem to surround us and to surround our hazy heads. These are kept safe, secure, always there to comfort me, no matter how bad things can be. When I close my eyes and I'm there, in Yaya's house, no one can reach us. These elemental memories are protected from any harm. So that was the day before, 24th, the preparation during the day. The shenanigans of Christmas Day barbecue, I suppose they're going to be a bit familiar to most of you, I think. The drunken dancing and non-stop eating is similar, I guess, to all cultures, just the season really varies. Of course, the barbecue ritual here is a bit more important. It's not like just some quick steaks and sausages that you put on the barbecue and then you eat and you go. Although we had both of these as well included in our barbecue feast. But yeah, this was a different affair. You understand, that was a slow affair. We started early in the morning and requiring patience and grit and deep knowledge of the charcoal, the fire, and its capricious character, which needs to be controlled and adjusted even after a couple of glasses of raki or grappa, which of course we consumed from early in the morning as we need to warm up our cockles. So yeah, you understand that we were out there on average in the cold, crisp winter morning, and of course on the contrasting heat of the pit for about 7 hours. So yeah, I won't bore you. I won't bore you too much with the details here. A party is a party. You know what's happening in a party. And after all, there are plenty of barbecue pitmaster style food programs for you to watch. If you want to know how to cook a whole pig on a spit. Let's just say that most of the time, we would fight over the tastier firstly cooked parts of the spit roast. And generally that was the testicles or the bit of the meat at the back of the legs where the bone started to split and the skin was very, very crunchy. So yeah, that's Christmas Day for you. But of course, Greek Christmas doesn't end here. One wouldn't persevere with the Lent for 40 days. Well, okay, none of us did actually, to get just one day of feasting. It hardly seemed a fair exchange, don't you think? No, there is more, a lot more to come. So back to my immediate family's homes. So yeah, me, my dad, my mom, brother, and our other yaya. There's a lot more wholesome cooked food waiting. Both mom and grandma can't help themselves, but cook a mountain of food as if we haven't eaten for months, and as if we were waiting the whole long lost family to appear, all 50 of them, for our Christmas dinner table. And these celebratory dishes are many. Pork, it's obviously the main meat, and there are countless dishes with it. And the reason for this is called something called Guru no Hara, we kind of touched earlier on. It's the most popular tradition in most regions of Greece, which means pig joy, and takes place around Christmas. This is the slaughter of the pig, which has been fattening for over a year. Traditionally, it was always been the time of happiness and revelry. Not that the pig was joyous with the prospect of its sacrifice, this is certain, but joy for the village folk. The felled animal will be savoured all winter long, as we've touched earlier, usually as the only source of meat. Hence, the tradition calls for pork for Christmas Day, either whole on the spit, as my family did, or cooked in various different ways. There's also something called Christopsomo, which is a festive spiced bread, made at Christmas time and traditionally eaten on Christmas Eve. It was always made with the most expensive ingredients: highly sifted white flour, sesame seeds, and spice mixtures such as aniseed, orange, bay, cinnamon, and cloves. On top, other dishes that are a must and adorn every festive dinner table were there. Stuffed cabbage leaves, with veals, mince, and spices, in a thick avolemon sauce. Pork tenderloin cooked with chestnuts and apricots. A capon or a cockerel stuffed with Swiss chard, rice, and wild fennel. Mountains of nut and honey syrup-soaked cookies called melomacarona, and kourabiedes, which is another dessert, or almond shortbread biscuits, which are related to numerous Middle Eastern biscuits, which are found further back in the past in the Ottoman and the Persian cuisine. And of course, countless pies. Savory meaty ones for New Year's Eve, which they're eaten late, around midnight, just before we go out for an all-nighter. And sweet cake, pie-like cake, for New Year's Day's lunch. Vasilopita, which is prepared for Saint Vasilios, Aios Vasilis, our version of Santa Claus, with a coin inside for a good luck. There is the shepherd's meat pie, which is made up in the mountains of all over Epirus, which is in northwest Greece. And this is made with lamb and filo pastry. In places like Thessalia, which is central Greece, this is made with pork or rabbit. Up in where I'm from, we use beef and leek. And on all of this, you can insert a coin for good luck, actually, just like Vasilopita. In the island of Lesbos, there's a very skilled, highly complicated filo making pie, a traditional sweet and savory pie, which has consecutive layers of filo, which give the unique pie the festive character. And this is for New Year's, cheese and spice New Year's pie from Lesbos. And for this, obviously, you make the filo with fennel seeds and flour and baking powder and salt and sugar and olive oil and butter. And the filling is kefalotiri cheese, mizithra cheese. You have fresh ginger, you have ground cloves, you have ground cinnamon, freshly grated nutmeg, ground allspice, and you garnish it. Obviously, you have sesame seeds to garnish it, and you bake it like this. Another incredible recipe here. Now it's time for a traditional Greek recipe, Christmas recipe, and this is a sweet that we do, that every household do during Christmas, and this is the melomacarona, basically syrup-drenched nut and spice cookies. And this recipe is from Peloponnesos, and it's made with olive oil rather than butter or margarine or other disgusting oils. So for this, we make the cookies, so we have a dough, and we make a syrup, which we then, after we cook the cookies, we put them into the syrup. Okay, for the syrup, you need 1 cup of sugar, 1 cup of honey, half a cup of water, 1 medium cinnamon stick, and 1 wide strip of lemon zest. For the cookies, and this will give you 40 to 50 cookies, you need 3 to 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, half a teaspoon of ground cloves, 1 cup of extra virgin olive oil, half a cup of sugar, half a teaspoon of baking soda, half a cup of fresh orange juice, a quarter of a cup brandy, like metaxa, for example, that we have in Greece, and 1 cup of chopped walnuts, and then the zest of 1 orange grated. There are a few different variations on how to make them, but first make the syrup. So bring the sugar, honey, and water to boil in a medium-sized saucepan. Add the cinnamon and lemon zest and simmer over medium heat for 10 minutes. Let it cool completely. For the cookies, sift together 3 cups of the flour, the baking powder, cinnamon, and cloves in a small bowl and set aside. In a large bowl, beat the olive oil with the sugar until creamy. Stir in the baking soda into the citrus juice and add the oil and sugar mixture. Add the brandy, walnuts, and grated zest, and continue mixing vigorously until combined. Slowly add the flour to the mixture, beating vigorously with a wooden spoon until a stiff dough forms. Preheat the oven to 160 degrees Celsius. Lightly oil 2 large baking sheets. One at a time, break off pieces of dough the size of a big walnut and shape into a small mounted oblongs. Place 1 inch apart on the baking sheet and bake until lightly browned, so about 20 minutes. Remove from the oven and submerge in the cooled syrup to soak for a few minutes. Drain them, if that's desired, on racks and then sprinkle on top some finely pounded walnut crumb, and they are delicious, trust me. So, Agios Vasilis, the Greek Santa Claus, which is not Santa Claus, but Agios Vasilis, which brings presents to the kids on New Year's Eve. It's originated on a different level from Saint Nicholas that we have from the rest of Europe and the Germanic Santa Claus, Saint Nicholas, and so on. I guess you all are more familiar with this story. The Greek one, so the Greeks generally, they never associated Saint Nicholas with Christmas to such an extent as the Europeans did. For us, basically, Saint Nicholas' main characteristic, at least in Greek folk tradition and religion, is that he serves as the protector of the seas, and he's the patron saint of sailors. He was serving as a bishop of Myra, a city in Turkey, nowadays Turkey, and he was known as a participant in the Seminal Council of Nicaea in the year 325 AD, which saw the adoption of the Nicene Creed in our religion. It's the basis of the belief system of Christians. So basically, he's known for a much more generous act. A poor family in Myra, with many daughters, was known to have fallen on hard times. And the situation which was so dire, in fact, that the father was considering selling one of his daughters into slavery and prostitution so the family could survive. So to save her from this horrendous fate, Saint Nicholas threw gold coins down the chimney of the man's house, thereby saving her and rescuing the family from their predicament. So if that happened or not, or things happen exactly this way, we don't know, but it was Saint Nicholas who said to have committed this act of kindness, and this was the reason why he is associated with chimneys and presents and so on. So one version of the story even says that the gold coins landed in the girl's stocking, which she hung up on the mantle to dry. Anyway, that's that story. But with the Greeks, the Christian Greeks, and Saint Vasilius, the story is a little bit different. Anyway, Saint Nicholas, his remains were in the basilica in the church of the town, and was in a sarcophagus in the church. But in 1087, when the Christian Greeks of the region were subjugated by the newly arrived Muslim Seljuk Turks, then a group of merchants from the Italian city of Bari removed the major bones of Saint Nicholas' skeleton from the sarcophagus, and without authorization, of course, as we've seen the Italians and other plunderers do, and brought them to their hometown. So now they're enshrined in the Basilica di San Nicola in Bari, and And of course, this is the story of St. Nicholas, but not the story of our Greek St. Basilius. St. Basil, or Basilius in Greek, whose feast day is on the January the 1st, is always remembered by the Greek people as the figure who bore gifts and helped children, the poor and the underprivileged around Christmas time. Saint Basil of Caesarea lived from 329 AD, or C, as it's better to say, to January the 1st, 379 CE, and was a near contemporary of the Saint Nicholas, who died around the year 343. Basil served the church as the bishop of Caesarea in Cappadocia, in Asia Minor. He was an influential theologian who supported the Nicene Creed, as we just seen earlier. But yeah, he focused mostly, in community life, liturgical prayer, and manual labor, and in building the monastic life in Eastern Christianity. So the great saint was not just an intellectual, but lived in this world as well. And he became known early on for his care for the poor and underprivileged, and for his extremely generous nature. And the legend has it that tax collectors once overtaxed the people to the extent that they were forced to hand over all the jewelry to the authorities. And Basil declared that this was unjust and forced the tax collectors to give him the jewelry so that he could return it to the people. Of course, at that point, it was impossible to determine which jewelry belonged to whom. So he came up with a novel idea to bake cakes with the jewelry placed inside them, and to distribute the cake slices amongst the populace. Each person received a piece of the cake with jewelry baked inside, and the riches were thereby distributed back to the people and on equal fashion. So this incident has never been forgotten among the Greek people's psyche, who forever associate Basil with the tradition of gift giving. So yeah, the modern tradition in Greece is not to give gifts on Christmas Day, but on New Year's Day. And of course, yeah, with the feast on January the 1st, there's another perfect time to feast and eat and be merry and jolly. And on Epiphany, which is on the 6th of January, if I'm not mistaken, now, on Epiphany, which it's another big celebration in Europe in general and in Greece too. Again, there's again a very celebratory, festive table. Usually, again, the food on the table is pork. And the last day of the 3-day celebration of Epiphany, which is the day of St. John the Baptist, plenty of festive foods are eaten again too, with many pork dishes and many desserts served on the family table. And I'll be back after this short break. Today's episode is brought to you with the welcome support of Malbin Greek, UK's leading Greek delicatessen supplier and distributor of premium Greek produce. If you're longing for Greek Christmas, why don't you get your celebratory kourabiedes and melomakarona from Malbin and Greek? Malbin Greek has delicious Christmas hampers with kourabies, with melomakarona, Greek olive oils and alcohol and chocolates and other sweets to make your Christmas as Greek as possible. Whatever your needs, Malbin Greek has you covered. You can shop online and have the divine and delicious goods delivered to your doorstep across the UK, or you can visit the shop at Arch 17 Apollo Business Park, Lucy Way, SC16 4ET, Bermondsey, London. Malbin Greek, the one-stop shop for your Greek fix. And for you dear listeners, there's a fantastic discount of 15% if you use online the discount code DELICIOUS. Yeah, talking about Christmas and New Year's pies and cakes, indeed, there are traditional cakes made and eaten almost everywhere in Western Europe between Christmas and early January. For example, in Gascony, in France, in nowadays France, aniseed cakes used to be distributed after the midnight mass at Christmas. And indeed, there are traditional cakes made and eaten almost everywhere in Western Europe between Christmas and early January. They include the 12th Night cake, which is in direct line of descent from the Roman cakes of Janus, after whom January is named. Janus, god of the double gate, the gate that opens and the gate that shuts, had two faces and a double mission: to look back at the past, the old year, and forward to the future,
the new year.
In southern France, in Aix and Provence, they make calissons, which they must be made with almonds. They consist of marzipan and crystallized fruits mixed with orange flower water. All the ingredients being very Provençal and worthy of a sweetmeat, which is the pride of Aix. At Christmas festivities in Aix and Provence, rich families and confectioners had them distributed by priests at Mass instead of the consecrated bread. In fact, calissons do contain wafer substance like the wafers of the host in the Catholic Church. And peasants going to work in the fields of the 15th century, like the great lords and ladies of Paris, whose palates were tempted by the highly sophisticated foods of the royal court. The peasants knew only of the figs of Provence, dried by the sun and the mistral wind. Yeah, both of them were eating figs at this time of the year. Dried figs were also a feature of the traditional 13 desserts of Christmas. With walnuts or hazelnuts, raisins, and almonds, they were one of what were called the four orders of baking friars, so called because the different colors of the nuts and the dried fruit suggested the colors of their habits. A treat for children was the capuchin nougat, a dried fig split open and stuffed with a green walnut.
So in the Middle Ages and then medieval times, in Central Europe, carp is the king of the fish. And be Christmas or Easter, the festive table would be unthinkable without it. In the Middle Ages southern Bohemia, they had an international reputation for its well-organized carp breeding. Goose was also frequently served at Christmas in Europe. The bird was often roasted or boiled and served with a sauce or condiment, or the meat would be minced and put into pies. In the Christian Middle Ages, wild boar's head was the crowning of the Christmas feasts and other festive dinners of nobility. Aside from the head and the meat, the liver, lungs, stomach, and even blood of wild boar appear in the recipes of the time. How prized an animal wild boar was can be seen from the fact that some of the medieval recipes promise to make beef liver taste like wild boar liver. The Germanic tradition was to serve roast goose at Christmas. This is convenient as well, since the goose, which is a large bird, hatches in spring and it's in its prime at 8 or 9 months old. Any older, and it will not be a success roasted. It then be braised or casseroled. Fruit stuffings and accompaniments, popular in German cuisine, help to counteract the fatness of the flesh with their acidity and make it more digestible. In medieval Britain, and a little bit later on, manorial records and account books tells us that the diet of the peasants was not dissimilar to that of the peasants in continental Europe. Additionally, the food of manorial servants was generally more varied, with beef, herring, or cod as additional sources of protein, and bread made from rye and wheat. The yeoman had bacon flitches, eggs, cheese, butter, milk, cream, onions, garlic, and malt to make ale. At Christmas, the lord would receive a hen or grain for the brewing of ale from his tenants, and in return would give them a meal that included not just the staple foods of bread, cheese, and pottage, but various meat dishes. Among the fruits and nuts peasants in medieval Europe often had access to were cherries, apples, pears, plums, filberts, walnuts, and sweet chestnuts. Parsley and other pot herbs, small birds, rabbits, some fresh water and salt fish, and cockles also found their way into many villagers' stew pot.
William Peter's Ingliston household, Sir William Peter was a Secretary of State to 3 successive Tudor monarchs, namely King Henry VIII, Edward VI, and Queen Mary I. Anyway, in his household in the 1550s, the culinary traditions, which we have them written down, so the culinary traditions of Christmas had not altered substantially from those of the previous centuries. For most, it still meant brawn, along with fresh beef, mutton, pork, goose, turkey, apples, and cheese, and enormously hard work in the kitchen. The witty Renaissance English poet Nicholas Breton wrote that for the 12 days festival, capons and hens, beside turkeys, geese, and ducks, besides beef and mutton, must all die for the great feast. For in 12 days, a multitude of people will not be fed with a little. Now plums and spice, sugar and honey, square it among pies and broth. Youth must dance and sing, and the aged sit. And if the cook do not lack wit, he will sweetly lick his fingers. Shred pies filled with meat, dried fruits, sugar, and spices were piled up beside good drink and a blazing fire. The Tudors welcomed the Lord of Misrule with open arms, reveling in magicians, fools, and music, and in a special new 12th night cake, one of the earliest of the English spicy fruit cakes, into which a pea or a bean was baked. Whoever found it was crowned the king or queen of the bean for the evening, presiding over the fun and games. Of course, during the Commonwealth that followed, there were unhappy times. The colour was lit out of life in Christmas. Puritans wore stark black with square white collars and linen caps or tall hats, and Christmas celebrations were banned. Pleasure was repressed, and fishy days and fasting were prescribed as popish. But I think people ignored them and they celebrated nevertheless. I hope so anyway. Fast forwarding in Victorian times, Fortnum & Mason provided the finest pre-packed hampers available, and they were so successful that they began to displace the great Christmas pies of old as gifts for the family and friends. And the ideal Christmas family, which was projected from Victoria, from Queen Victoria to her subjects, broadly solemn and religious, but concentrated and crystallized not on the 12th night, as we have in most of Europe, really, but on Christmas Day itself. And of course, the food, it was starting to change a little bit, but still resembled bits of the past. So we still have plum puddings and mince pies, which were the leftover of a forgotten age, as I said. And there was still, these mince pies had beef and minced beef, and they had the best kidney puddings. And of course, slowly that beef was replaced by goose as the choice of meat for the festive table. And the plump breasts of the goose were carved for the family, and the legs were sent down to the kitchen for the staff.
In my hometown of Varia, when we were growing up, most people, most of my family and relatives will remember what our most common and popular dish was for our Christmas table. Obviously, there's a lot of influences over the years from USA and so on, but overall, the strong Greek Orthodox traditions remain intact on our Christmas table, especially on more rural backgrounds and more working class and more away from Athens and the capital and the influence of external factors. Let's go and check some traditional dishes.
Yeah, most people from the childhood time remember pork. Pork cooked either in the oven or on the spit. And for some people who were more inclined to follow the Lent, 24th was still a day of Lent, and there was just a bean soup without olive oil, with lots of olives, of course, which are allowed in Greek Orthodox Lent, and lots of onion with salt. Then there was a fashion of turkey, of course, even on the Greek table, unfortunately. And a lot of people started having turkeys, and then until the point that everybody in the family agreed that this is really boring and tasteless. So let's go back to pork. I think for most of you British listeners, I guess your typical family Christmas was roast turkey with all the usual accompaniments. And I guess people will have desserts as well as Christmas cake and trifle with meringue, cheeses, assortment of cheeses, and I guess some people will have some duck as well if they were fancy. And yeah, again, speaking with lots of friends here in UK of all ages and from all over the the country, Scotland and so on. again, a lot of people find turkey quite boring, a boring dish. So yeah, everybody seems to start diversifying a little bit on their Christmas table. And yeah, salmon is a good idea. Goose is another good idea that people cook. Stuffed chicken or a cockerel or something like that. And yeah, pork as well. And yeah, this is it more or less. A short description of Christmas, my Christmas, ancient Christmas, traditional stuff, and an overview of different dishes of the festive period. I hope you've enjoyed this bonus episode, our little Christmas festive episode, full with memories of childhood Christmases. I think that's all from me.
Now you know I love you all, and I know you love me. So please, 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 if you want to give me the perfect Christmas gift, do subscribe on my Patreon page at patreon.com/The Delicious Legacy for early access to the episodes, all ad-free of course, with exclusive videos and unique recipes from the ancient world, and of course other traditional stuff, all at your fingertips. You can find all of the past video recipes on YouTube, where you can subscribe and get the episodes of the podcast there as well, at Thomas Dinas at The Delicious Legacy. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcast from, and tell your friends and family to get a bit of the Delicious Legacy in their lives. If you have a moment, please do drop me a like and a review wherever you get your podcast from. It helps enormously to signpost new listeners to the podcast. If you want to drop me a line and get in touch with questions or ideas about future episodes or guests to the podcast, please do get in touch on Twitter or Instagram or on Patreon. Anyway, I better let you go. I've been Thomas Dinas, and we just had the best Christmas feast on this episode of The Delicious Legacy. See you next time for more archaeogastronomical adventures. Merry Christmas to all. Bye!